Welcome to another episode of the Catholic Novel. Today we're going to talk about The World, the Flesh, and Father Smith by Bruce Marshall. Now, in the many years I've been interested in the Catholic novel and read many articles about it, often, almost always, four names appear. Graham Greene, Francois Mauriac, George Bernanos, and even the war, at least his Brideshead Revisited. And of course, we've dealt, in this series, we have dealt, or we will deal with all four of those writers. I don't know why this is so. I never thought of Bruce Marshall as in the same league as Greene, Mauriac, War, or Bernanos. And maybe he wasn't. But because of this series, I have come to appreciate him much, much more. When I gave the talk on Father Malachi's Miracle, I told you it's one of the funniest novels I've ever read in my life. And this novel, I think, has given me many insights into the priesthood. Marshall is a very clear writer. Now, I want to say right away, this novel is not a homily, it's not a sermon, it's not preachy at all. And I guess that's what great writers can do. They can weave into a story the points they want to make without making it sound like, learn this lesson or here's what I'm trying to teach you. Walker Percy claimed he had written a couple of very scholarly articles, and he actually said this. He said he thought he had something to say to contemporary people, and he believed that he would reach more people by writing novels. Now that's dangerous because that can mean, you're not putting out literature, you're putting out a set of sermons or something. I don't think Percy did that. I think he was enough a skilled writer that he avoided doing that. Now, Bruce Marshall does not do it either. Now in this particular book, I think, at least one of the ways he does it is through Father Smith and another priest. They seem to have two different visions of the Catholic apostolate. And Father Smith is kind of critical of this other priest who has the rather strange name of Father Bonnyboat, okay? Why does he look down on him? Because he thinks Father Bonnyboat is too interested in the aesthetics, A-E-S-T-H-E-T-I-C, the aesthetics of the liturgy. Beautiful music, beautiful vestments, very good homilies, whereas Father Smith seems to want to get down in the trenches and really, fight it out with people, and that Catholicism is a tough religion, and the priest has got to get his hands dirty, and like Pope Francis, the priest has got to have the smell of the sheep on him. Well, I want to read part of an explanation that Father Bonnyboat gives to Father Smith on why he is interested in the liturgy. Now, when I was reading the book for this show, this page kind of jumped out at me because I have a vague recollection of having discussions like this. I was in the major seminary in 1954 to 1960, so that was before Vatican II. And the liturgy was still in Latin. And we had a club at the seminary, the liturgy club, and it caused me to have a tremendous conversion. I was 20 years old, 21, 22. I've been a Catholic all my life. I had no understanding of what Catholic liturgy really means. Let me just say it simply. What makes Catholic liturgy greater than any other prayer is this: it's primarily Christ praying. If after this talk I go upstairs and say an Our Father, the value of that prayer depends on the holiness of Father Bob Lauder, okay? The value of the Mass depends on the holiness of Jesus Christ. We just share in it. We just participate in it. So I underwent a revolution in the mid-50s, okay? And then, of course, everything went into the vernacular and so on. So I have a vague recollection that what Father Bonnyboat is saying is something like what hit me in the 1950s, and that's probably why I'm singling this out. So he's kind of defending himself against Father Smith, all right? To his surprise, Father Bonnyboat didn't bark back at him, but came over and stood with him at the window and took his arm. So Father Smith has criticized Father Bonnyboat, and then Father Bonnyboat says, "You're right and you're wrong, Father," he said. "You're right because men can't live by liturgy alone, and you're wrong because man needs beauty in his soul as well as bread in his belly. Tell me, what do you think all these people are standing out there in that queue for if it isn't to take their longing for excitement and romance and beauty?" He's talking about a movie theater, okay? "And Almighty God is ever so much more exciting and romantic and beautiful than the heroine of any cinematograph film. Only people don't know that. At this point in time, I think we have a kind of a crisis in our country, and maybe it's in the world, that vast numbers of people are not attending the Eucharist. And I have a friend who has children around 21, 22, 23, and she says, there's nothing there for them. They can't relate to it. And I wish I had some answers. I don't have answers, but at least one of the answers is that those of us who celebrate the liturgy should do it as best we possibly can, as beautifully as we can. We should prepare our homilies. The points in the Mass we should sing, we should all sing. This is on my mind lately, So anyway, I agree with a great deal of what Father Bonnie-Boat says. So then he says, it's up to us, priests of the Catholic Church, to make them see it. And that's why we are right to make our services as lovely and austere as possible. Because like that, we're not only honoring God ourselves, but we're making other people honor him too. Okay? How people convert, how people change, how people grow in holiness, tremendous mystery, okay? A seminarian once told me the big mistake that was made in his seminary education was this. The professors gave him the impression that if you do everything right, if you do everything the way it's supposed to be done, people will respond. And he said it was a tremendous letdown when I found out that was not true. I think the example he gave was confraternity. I created the greatest confraternity, I had great teachers, and the kids did not respond. Now, let me underline this for you. That is an extremely discouraging experience. If you're working with what you think is the most important thing in your life, and you can't communicate it to others, or you don't seem to be communicating it to others because they're nowhere near as excited about it as you are, that's really devastating. Now, despair is out for a Catholic. We don't despair, but we should not be discouraged. We have to keep reminding ourselves, hey, we don't redeem people. We don't save people. I think as a young priest, I thought that's what I did. I was saving people. No, Christ saved them. Okay, I'm just participating in his mission. All right. So you've got to keep a balance. It's not easy. You've got to be really zealous, but you also have to make plenty of room for the Holy Spirit, okay? And when they honor him, they can't help being more kindly and charitable to their fellow men, who also are made in his image. I know, Father, that you're impatient to see the good come out of this horrible war we've just been fighting. But believe me, God's old, slow, sure way of calling men is still the best. And now, that's the end of what Father Bonnie-Boat said. And then Father Smith was smiling as he allowed himself to be led back to the table, because he knew that it wasn't going to be difficult any longer for him to pray for Father Bonnie-Boat, because Father Bonnie-Boat was as eager as himself about the Lord's cause, only in a different way. That was all. And a public confession, okay? I've had experiences like that with other priests, where I tend to be critical of them, and then all of a sudden, they knock my socks off. They do something that I didn't think they could do, or I didn't think they were doing, and that's a great experience. But let me add also, I have similar experiences with lay people. Well, I find one of the greatest blessings in my life is the really inspiring lay people I know. Now, in preparing this talk, I noticed almost a third of the episodes, a priest has a key role in the novel. And I did not plan that. I didn't say to myself, let's see if we can get all the novels we can find about priests. I didn't plan it, but I think writers find priests, the vocation of a priest, really interesting. And dramatists love confession scenes. Some of the most dramatic scenes in movies are the confession scenes. In the movie Priest, which I don't know whether anybody saw that but me, but there's a confession scene which actually sends chills up your spine. And in the novel Mariette in Ecstasy, there's a confession scene, and it's Satan. Satan has assumed the appearance of a nun, and he's in the confessional. The first time I read that, I think my hair suddenly went gray, okay? So I think writers find priests interesting. I met a theologian one time who said the first year she taught theology, she couldn't get the wavelength of the students. So instead of using a textbook, she used novels. And the thought occurred to me, you could make a really terrific theology course by the priesthood in literature. Or you wouldn't even have to call it that. You call it something else, the mystery of God in literature. But there are enough novels in which priests figure. Just let me mention some of the ones we've done, okay? We've done Green's The Power and the Glory. We did Bernanos' The Diary of a Country Priest. We did Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. We did Mariette in Ecstasy. We did Endo's Silence. We did Father Malachi's Miracle. We did The World of Flesh and Father Smith. We did Waterfront. I mean, this was not planned by me. This just happened as I tried to think about the different Catholic novels. So Bruce Marshall has gone way up in my estimation. Now that was Father Bonnyboat. Later in the novel, Father Smith is giving a talk to priests, and he's basically telling them to be more holy. I mean, I could summarize the whole talk that way. He says, when we first ordained, we saw that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to help other people to be that way. Well, why aren't we as on fire now? Have we let it become routine and so on? Just let me read just a couple of lines from this talk he gives, okay? Right Reverend and Very Reverend Fathers, there are more than 300 million Catholics in the world today, belonging for the most part to the civilized nations of Europe. What an influence for good could we not exercise if each one of those 300 million Catholics were an ardent follower of Christ, ready to put the teaching of his holy religion before interests of self or country? Instead of that, whom do we find? We find that heretics and schismatics, even atheists, are claiming to practice a charity more perfect than ours. For what else is the communist heresy but the boast to be able to love one's neighbor without first loving God? And then he goes on to urge priests to be more holy. And then when he sits down, he doesn't know whether he succeeded or not, whether anybody really heard what he was trying to say. So the novel it's not a comedy novel the way Father Malachi's Miracle is by Bruce Marshall, but it's a really good novel, and I think you will enjoy it. So take a look at The World, the Flesh, and Father Smith.